Good morning and welcome to today's meeting, Executive Subcommittee of the Lennon Families Committee. And welcome. Apologies. First of all, Wallace, I have apologies from Councillor Carr, who's unwell.
Yeah, no formal apologies have come in, convene.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest from members? No, and I should say at this point, normally we do like to observe protocols with questions and comments in the chat, given that it's Councillors Ahern and Councillors Cuthbert just in the chamber, by all means waived, but for Councillor Shires and Barrett online, just do the usual C and Q if that's okay. Item 3 is the minute of the meeting of our last Executive Subcommittee. Can we approve these minutes? Councillor Cuthbert.
If I might ask a question, I note there's no outstanding business statement. We had the workshop, which was very well received. It was a great event. I also asked if we could have a report brought back to this committee on the quality indicators on secondary schools, identifying whether satisfactory or below, and giving some idea of what's going to be done to bring them up to standard. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but I would have hoped to see that in an outstanding business statement.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. I think 2 or 3 things there. I think the outstanding business statement, and Wallace will maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I think normally we haven't just by routine had an outstanding business statement in Executive Sub. I don't see that there's any reason why we shouldn't, if members so wish. But thank you for your kind comments on the workshop. I really enjoyed it as well, actually, and having had discussions since with our strategic lead, I do think these things should be, notwithstanding staff time, etc., and indeed time of elected members, but I do think we feel that it would be really useful to have these kind of workshops fairly regularly. Personally, I think the idea of sitting round with people and discussing it at a table rather than in a more formal setting, and of course with these things a brief presentation introduction is always valuable, but I thought the nature of the discussion was really helpful rather than a kind of 2-hour presentation, if you like, I suppose. So thank you. I think we do need to keep doing these things. As in terms of the request on a report on satisfactory lists, I think if I may, I'll let Sheena deal with that one. Thank you.
Councillor Cuthbert, I know that you had asked for something quite particular and had asked the convener for that. The convener, as I understand it, had explained that the workshop session was the start of a means of providing information to elected members in relation to school improvement and quality assurance. And actually, as I had understood it, there was no commitment to providing that specific report. The evaluations in relation to the 4 core quality indicators are contained within every school's standards and quality report, and the actions to improve those are then contained in each school's school improvement plan, which will also become available quite soon. So all of those are available publicly on each school's website, and also on the PKC schools pages, where each school has a page, and inspection reports, quality improvement review letters that are published now as part of the quality improvement reviews are published, standards and quality reports. School improvement plans are available from the schools. I don't think there's a requirement for them to actually be published on the website, that's a working document. So all of that information is there. And a school improvement plan sets out that process by which improvement will be undertaken. Interestingly, today, and I've not had time to fully brief the convener, given we only got the verbal feedback on Friday, but we did receive verbal feedback on Friday from His Majesty's Inspectors of Education, and I had mentioned that that inspection was actually happening last week, and there was overwhelmingly positive feedback in terms of the process, the procedures, the guidance, the support and the challenge that's provided by central staff for schools in terms of their improvement. And one of the things that was highlighted as something that will be identified as an area of national good practice was the series of frameworks that we shared with you. I remember putting a slide up at that session, and so the view of His Majesty's Inspectors is that that's considered best practice. What also came through was the openness with which we have public meetings that follow on from inspections. It's funny, you assume that everybody always just does something similar like that, but apparently not. And that was highlighted as practice that will be shared across the country as well. And the level of challenge that comes from the central teams to school teams and the partnership working was also identified. There were two areas where inspectors understood were having a significant impact in terms of progress, and those related to recruitment difficulties of staff, and that's not a Perth and Kinross issue, that's a national issue in particular places, and the significant increase in young people who present with more and more complex needs. And so those two areas were certainly identified within that verbal feedback. And for committee's benefit, we will receive in due course a draft report. We'll be able to comment on that for accuracy and around the veracity of any statements that are made around practice in relation to that. Each 32's local authorities singular reports will not be published, but rather there will be a thematic report published from a national perspective. And so I would expect in time, convener, to actually come, whether it would be in discussion with you, to this committee or to the wider Committee of Learning and Families. I would probably want to do a report based on the process of that inspection and the outcomes from that, but not bring the draft report, which is simply a working document for the purposes of HMI, to then provide their full report in due course. But I would expect that there would be interest and would take advice from yourself on which committee to bring that to. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you for that answer. That was very comprehensive. I'm just wondering, would it be possible to get the report for Perth and Kinross Council distributed to the members of this executive subcommittee, just so we can get a feel for it before the big report comes out covering the general aspects?
I'm unsure as to the status of what that report will look like at the point of it being concluded. I know that there are a number of reports that are, if you like, considered to be working documents, Councillor Cuthbert, and therefore we are not at liberty to publish those. They belong to Education Scotland and to HMIE, but I will ask the question.
Thank you. Certainly, just to add to that, I mean, I think anything that comes from that, I think in broad terms, I think we try and work collegiately on learning and families, and I think anything that I see, I'm quite happy for you guys to see. I think in a broad sense, if that's helpful. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. If we can move on to the only item of real substance today, which is Standards and Equality in Schools, Learning Communities and Preschool Centres, Daycare of Children paper. It's slightly ironic that we had that, and thank you again for your kind words. I did enjoy it, but it's slightly ironic that we had that last week, and I think for the first time in a long time on our executive subcommittee, we now have no school inspections to consider, which is slightly ironic and maybe a little bit unfortunate. But we do have a couple of nurseries. So Sheila, thank you. And I think Ben, you'll probably say something as well. Thanks.
Thank you, convener. You're absolutely right. The purpose of this report is, in its broadest sense, to bring before this committee the outcomes of any inspections that have been taken. Members will appreciate that there's a lead-in time in terms of the cycle for papers coming to this report. And so it's accurate to say that at the point of writing this report, there were no school inspections that were published. There have been 2 published since this, if you like, report was put together and then put in the system, and they will come in the next report, as would normally happen when publication misses the cut-off date for here. So there will be, can guarantee there will be at least 2, possibly more inspections coming in the next report. And we have 2 reports here, and just want to say a wee bit about those. The first relates to Corner House, which is a private provider, and it's reported because of the agreement we have about reporting by exception, and that's exception in the gradings in relation to that. The second report ordinarily would not come to this committee because the gradings don't fit with the categories of which we consider to be exceptional, i.e. weak, unsatisfactory or excellent. However, because the previous reports in relation to ABC were reported here because of the exceptional nature of the gradings, and because of the work that we had explained was underway, and where we were beginning to see green shoots of significant improvement, we thought it would be reassuring for the committee to see the most recent unannounced report following on from an inspection, sorry, not an unannounced report, an unannounced inspection, and bring the report for that. So ordinarily, convener, we may well have only had the 1 report here, but we did feel that it was important to bring the ABC one as well. And you're absolutely right. Ben will do an overview in relation to both, and between Ben, Scott and myself, we can take any questions that we're unable to answer. We will go back and find the answers for members of the committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. Am I okay letting Ben do your introduction before questions, Councillor Cuthbert? Is that okay? Ask them now then, please.
Yeah, my first question is, I note that we evaluate the unsatisfactory, weak and excellence, but I'm just wondering, why do we not also bring in reports on adequates? Because our target is good, so therefore adequate doesn't achieve good, so should they not also be included in the reports? That's the first question.
Sheila.
The national standard is where we have set the exceptions around, so the national standard is adequate or better. Whilst there's a local position, the national standard is adequate, and it's on that basis that we bring weak, unsatisfactory or excellence. Councillor Cuthbert.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about our ambition, if you like. I think we should be aiming higher. My feeling is that we should be seeing adequates in reports as well, if possible. It's up to yourselves whether that happens, but I think that would be sensible.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. Can we consider that? Thank you.
Second question. In the report, it says that 9 published inspections under 5.2. It would be useful if we could actually see which inspections had been carried out and the QIs for each one. So if there's some excellent ones, we can comment on it, or whatever. If there's some goods, I mean, it would be better to see it as a table, if you see what I mean.
I do, and again, James is on holiday, but that's something. If it's appropriate, I'll take that up with James, because again, very well made point. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. I aim to focus on the activity that has taken place since the inspections, rather than going through the detail of each inspection report. So to start with, Corner House. The setting was inspected in June 2024, and since that setting came into partnership with us, they have been working towards our expected standards through service improvement plans. As you'll see from the reports you have in front of you, they have a requirement and a number of recommendations, and have been graded as 2 adequate and 2 weeks. But since the publication of that inspection, we have had quite a lot of activity around about the setting and have met with the regional manager of the Thrive Group, who own that setting, to provide clarity on our expected standards and the required pace of necessary improvement to that particular setting. The new Thrive regional manager was able to provide us with reassurance, as they had recently conducted their own broad look at how they thought their setting was doing, and they had already written an action plan. So that indeed gave us some reassurance about their ability to improve, and they assured that they would be making some changes to the environment, their processes, and committed to sorting out their particular staffing difficulties. The early years team continue to support the setting in the usual way that we would normally do, with more regular visits. We have introduced modelling and coaching from some of the central team also to support the staff. And so we will be closely monitoring the progress of that setting over the next few months, with a very particular keen look at reviewing how they're doing around about December. So I'm happy to take any particular questions around that report for Corner House Thrive.
Thank you very much, Ben. Any questions from members? I have one, but I'll go last. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, convener. The first question is kind of a technical one. Just at the bottom of page 9 of the report, it says that the reports were as at 31st of May 2024, but then we've got reports here that come later than that, so it's just I think that's maybe out of date. But my question about the Corner House is, we know that there were issues with the previous service provided at this location, and I do appreciate very much the support that the early years team are providing to Thrive, and it is encouraging that the owners had already identified that there were issues. But I'm just wondering, I know there are resource issues, but is there more we could do to be proactive in supporting places where we think there may be risk of them being weak or unsatisfactory, rather than waiting for a damning care inspectorate report?
Ben.
That is indeed the case, Councillor Barrett. We run a very similar management system to ensure that these situations are minimal. The early years team have been supporting this setting on an ongoing basis since they came into partnership. We haven't ever had a period of time where we haven't done that. But they have had particular challenges around about staffing, and each time they make the progress at the pace we want, then there are staffing changes, and sometimes you have to start again, or some things progress in one area and then there's another area that we need to look at. So that ongoing support has been there and will continue to remain there. The education support officer is the main link to that setting, and we're constantly looking at how they are self-evaluating themselves and what are the mitigating actions that we can take to support them.
Thanks, Ben. Sheila, would you like to add something, please?
Thank you, convener. I think the point I would like to make, Councillor Barrett, is that actually one of the features that was fed back to us during the course of the thematic inspection week last week was that we know as an education authority the position in relation to our schools and to our centres, and actually we are not waiting and only find out when there's an external visit made. So whilst it might look like that in terms of, you know, the process that runs here is that reports are brought here and we talk about the work that's been done, that is not work that has just been done since the time of an inspection. And so the team from Education Scotland, His Majesty's Inspectorate, were absolutely clear that we know our centres and our schools very well. and that appropriate universal targeted or intensive support is provided. And there was acknowledgement of the kind of things that, as I mentioned when I gave some indication of some of the feedback, some of the major factors that contribute to what can be variation in performance or an increase or a decrease in terms of performance. But it's not about the fact that we are sitting doing nothing, that we do know about these and are proactive and active in terms of trying to improve and help these private centres, in this case, improve the quality of the provision. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheena. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shires, please.
Thank you, convener. My question's around the comments that Ben made about the coaching and modelling support that's given in the nursery, and kind of what that looks like, what kind of time is spent on that, because obviously that is quite a significant commitment from council officers to conduct that kind of work. I thought some of the language in the report where it talked about missed opportunities was quite sad to read, and I would guess that that would form part of the coaching and modelling work.
Ben, thank you.
Councillor Shires, that is indeed an unusual situation, but it is a result of some of the content of the report. That would be conducted on a short-term basis by our early years officers, overseen by the the education support officer, and it would be time limited and around about some of the interactions that we feel are so important in terms of children's experiences. So particularly in the 3 to 5 room, that's a short-term piece of work around about adult interactions, where we would hope to see progress.
Thank you, Ben. You okay with that, Councillor Shires?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hearn, please.
Thank you very much. My question's on the staffing. And when we looked at the quality indicator 1.1, it says there that some staff were nurturing, and then it goes on to say about long-term staff. And then later, when we look at the areas for improvement, it starts going on about the high turnover and the use of regular supply staff. Is that a particular issue either with this nursery, or is it an issue with the private sector in general, this high turnover of staff?
Ben, please.
There is a national issue with staffing, but this particular setting has had some issues with retaining their staff, and so when that is the case, and a member of staff leaves, there can be a period of time before you've recruited permanently again. So therefore you have to uphold the national standard in terms of ratios. So that's where people come in on a short-term supply basis, but it is problematic.
Thanks, Ben. Councillor Hearn.
Is that likely to change, or is that going to be just an ongoing situation?
It's something that the regional manager has committed to looking at. These are private businesses, and therefore how they work to attract and retain their staff is pertinent to them. But we have been given reassurance by the regional manager that that is something they're committed to improving.
Thanks, Ben. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I'm just curious. That this is presumably, it's a commercial operation. It's presumably quite a big group, whatever. I'm just wondering how it works in terms of do we get payment for the services we give to these companies, or is it part of our statutory obligation and we don't get any money back for it?
I'm assuming it's part of our 1140 hours commitment, but Ben, you'll maybe add to that.
We pay an hourly rate for each child that the setting has at the 1140 expanded hours 3 to 5 year olds. So we make the payments to them that come into us from the Scottish Government.
Mr. Cuthbert.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand if a provider is not providing a good service, is there some sort of contractual obligation that they pay some sort of penalty back to us for the non-provision of service, or how does that work?
I don't think there is. I think ultimately it's all about withdrawing that particular nursery as a third party provider, I think.
We have a robust contract management system in place, which includes the improvement planning periods. And so that is why we have the setting on the improvement plan with short-term checks, 6 monthly usually, to ensure that they're making the appropriate progress that we would expect.
Sheila?
Perhaps also worth saying, Councillor Cuthbert, in terms of that whole contract that we have with our partner providers, one of the things that we have traditionally, before the introduction of 1140 hours and have continued to do, is we provide support for staff, managers in all of the private providers around areas for things like child protection, a whole range of things to ensure that actually the standard in those areas is as good as the input that our own services get, and that's something that our partners recognise. So there's variation in terms of the payment that's paid across Scotland to partner providers. Where there is also variation is in terms of what you might describe as the in-kind support, and our partners benefit greatly from the in-kind support that's provided. But as we discussed with ABC at the last committee meeting, if the terms of the contract are not being met, then we would eventually, with all of that still being put in place and the provider not being able to bring about the necessary improvements, we would have to withdraw from that contract. That's how it works. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Do we have any comments specific to the Corner House report before I ask you, Ben, to chat about the ABC? We're all good. Okay, thank you. Ben, please.
Since our previous update regarding ABC Nursery in June, we can report that they are making good progress at a pace that provides us with confidence in their ability to maintain their improvements and make further progress. The Care Inspectorate returned to them on the 12th of June and graded all of the areas as adequate. The new management was acknowledged as creating the correct conditions for this improvement. She had been appointed just 7 days before the inspection visit, but she had been supporting the setting on a consultancy basis prior to that, and she brings a wealth of knowledge, skills and expertise. We have continued our support as we had prior to the grades of adequate, and we will continue to do so. We are aspirational for all of our settings, and we will continue to support them until they're visited again within the year, where we are confident that they will gain grades of good or better.
Thanks, Ben. Just before I invite questions, I do. It's good to see that one of our partner providers is now providing an adequate service. But I also take Councillor Cuthbert's point that we can't rest on our laurels with that one, and I'm sure we won't. Any questions on this particular report? No, good. Any comment? Councillor Cuthbert.
Yeah, I just wanted to say well done to the staff for getting it to an adequate level, and I look forward to reading a report sometime coming back saying they've achieved good or even excellent. Who knows? Thank you. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. I think I was going to ask a question at one point. It kind of got covered, but so I'll kind of dress it up in my comments, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But it feels like, maybe rather naively, that the process that we're going to undergo with appropriate intervention in the Corner House is similar to the appropriate interventions which have had some success to date with the ABC. And I think it is really important that, although they are commercial private organisations, because they're working in partnership with us under 1140 hours, it does mean we have a moral responsibility and also a statutory one, I suspect, to make sure that they're up to scratch, as it were, if that's not too much of a simplistic term. So if you can pass on our thanks here to the teams for the work that they've done with the ABC and the continuing work that they are doing with the ABC, and the continuing work that they'll feels like they're also going to have to do with Corner House, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. If there are no more questions or comments about anything, we will draw a rather shortened version of this particular executive sub to a close. But thank you very much as always for positive engagement. Thank you.